Greetings shippers, welcome back, and it's time to do something a little off the cuff. This is going to be a general discussion about shipping in Voltron and why it can be so difficult to talk about, because there are lots of factors at play. But we're going to focus on a couple of them. That's going to be the rapidity, or rather the lack of gap between seasons, and the question that you'll often hear shippers throw at each other no matter what show, book, whatever medium they're working in, that being, are we watching the same show? So at the time of this recording, Voltron Season 6 was recently released. And as always with the Voltron seasons, there is a lot of pressure depending upon what ship you ship, that being if you're not a multi-shipper or a poly-shipper, for someone who has an OTP that they're very invested in. Because of course one can ship and not be overly invested in one's ship, meaning that if it happens, great, if there's content, great, and one can even hope for it to become canon or maybe just have some moments, but it's not the be-all end-all of the show. Whereas for some people, it very much becomes the focus of what the show is about. And that can very much slant the fandom, because it means that certain people are watching the show very much looking for specific interactions, which can be fine, but at times can be taken too far, and can lead to the question, are we even watching the same show? You can see this in how certain people will come out of certain episodes or seasons with completely different viewpoints as to how a ship is faring. Some will feel that it is the pinnacle of shipping, and others will feel that the ship is dead. Because as often happens in fandom, people tend to speak in hyperbole. But why is this? Well, everybody ships in different ways, as we often talk about on this channel. Some people are more canonical-based shippers, meaning that they need some kind of proof, hints, or clues, or some kind of viable basis within the text itself for their ship to flourish. And if the text takes that away from them, or they see what they view as the text taking that away for another ship, they feel that that ship becomes less valid, and hence people should stop shipping, as it is what they would do. However, not everybody ships that way. Some people will completely extrapolate, and they don't need any textual support to do so. Not even subtextual support. The people don't even need to meet or share a scene. It's simply about the perceived chemistry and the narrative scenarios that they can come up with these characters. Or some people are also very good at seeing what they want to see. That being taking sequences and viewing them through a certain lens. This can often be called shipping goggles, which we have done a video on. It can be a positive or a negative. When people tend to use it, they tend to use it in the negative sense, however, especially if they're calling someone out for having shipping goggles. This, of course, is the phenomenon where one sees shipping everywhere, and will defend these instances to the bitter end. This can often come to a head if one feels they have some kind of evidence or proof that others are ignoring, or is simply not enough in the know to see. Whereas someone else who may not be shipping the same ship may watch the exact same sequence and not see any of that, because it may not be as forward as the shipper may think. Although at the same time, it can be fair to say that certain fans may not know what to look for, depending upon the pairing, or the circumstance. Basically, it's more there if you're looking for it. A great example of this is the final Infinity War scene, spoilers, for Steve and Bucky, in which Bucky's last words of Steve can either be interpreted as a sweet friendship moment, or as this extremely deep lover's cry between two people. It really depends on how you're looking at it. And when it comes to Voltron, people are entering at so many different points, meaning some people have been there from the beginning and have developed their ships from that point, whereas others are coming in later, or others are actually being drawn in from the fandom and entering the show looking to see the material in question. This can also lead to people claiming that the show is queerbaiting because of how it is discussed in the fandom. That being particularly surrounding the ship of Clance, which if one listens to certain fans has been labeled as practically canon, meaning that when people go in looking for this practically canon material and do not find it, for the Clance hints, if one believes that they are there, are nowhere near as overt as certain shippers would wish to believe. Though there are some who feel so strongly about this, to the point where they are actively boycotting the show because of it. This also ties into the fact that Voltron's staff and cast have very different ideas as to where the show is going and what shipping means. So you will have certain actors talking about their ships or where they think that the characters will go and keeping certain shipping avenues alive, whereas you'll have the production staff saying something completely different. This lack of communication, or simply lack of being on the same page, ends up playing out in fandom, as people will pick and choose what they want and apply it to their ships. And as a result, a lot of toxicity can be thrown between fans and then again back at the production staff, all people, basically whoever is saying what you don't want to hear, or saying things that some consider to be problematic. With Voltron, what it comes down to a lot of times is having tunnel vision, focusing solely on the ship that one wants and not taking a step back and looking around and seeing if perhaps the hints that one is seeing could pertain to some other ship, perhaps aren't as large as one thought, or perhaps aren't the focus of the show. Now, of course, people can watch and enjoy a show for whatever reason they want, and sometimes one simply falls into the shipping hole and it becomes the most enjoyable factor of a show. However, it is important to remember with a show like Voltron, that is definitely not the focus. Voltron has always been quite clear in what it is, which is a clever update, light space opera adventure fare, though it can of course explore and dive into deeper and darker themes, and many feel that as the show has gone on, it has begun to lean more and more in that direction. Supposedly aimed at a younger demographic, which it is, but it can be enjoyed by many age groups. So when people ask, are we watching the same show? The answer is no. People are not watching the same show. It may be the same text, but everybody is taking it and interpreting it very, very differently, and coming up with some very different beliefs and posits out of it. So it can be very difficult because people are also very firm in their beliefs, which makes discussing Voltron extremely fraught, especially as there are lots of accusations that end up being thrown back and forth in certain segments of the fandom. Accusations that go far beyond your ship is silly or not viable. Accusations that go into questions of character, deviance, illegality, all kinds of things. But some wonder, why is this so intense? Doesn't this happen with all shows? Well, it doesn't. Firstly, not all shows are as heavily shipped as Voltron is, but for shows that are this shipped, it is of course unfortunately normal to have shipping wars, especially when there are certain dominant ships that come to take over the fandom. In the minds of some, this is either a benign or a hostile takeover. It very much depends. However, with Voltron, the situation is a little different. Usually with shows, there is a bit of a longer gap in between seasons. However, because of how the show is airing, and for fear of losing the audience's attention span, Voltron has broken up several of its seasons from long seasons into short seasons, and is as a result airing them in very quick brackets, with a very small amount of months in between them, which is a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it does serve to keep the audience very, very hyped, though one could argue that they would perhaps be just as excited with a longer gap in place. However, if they do not want to take that risk, that is of course fine. On the flip side, it means that the fandom never gets the time to cool down, take a break, take a breather. Everybody is always on high alert, at least the people who are prone to being on high alert within a fandom, as of course there are always people who are very chill the entire time. So what that means is that these shipping wars never really have a chance to gear down. On top of that, not only are the little hints given by cast and producers always coming, but the official status is changing. With Voltron, a huge factor is ages, and those ages have been up in the air for quite a while, and with season 6 they appear to have finally solidified, and that changes a lot for a lot of shippers. However, for many, a lot of damage has been done because the rhetoric has, as I've said, been so vitriolic for so long. So in short, discussing Voltron ships can be very difficult. In many ways more difficult than it should be, as many people have a very strong vested interest in their ship being proven to be valid or morally right or going to happen canonically. So it's always important to say that ship and let's ship, and enjoy your ships. And of course, one can feel free to disagree with other ships or feel that they're icky or perhaps not the best, but when discourse takes the line into personal attacks, that's when fandom takes a steep nosedive into toxicity. And unfortunately, Voltron, especially the shipping side of Voltron, has a very negative reputation, which in some cases is warranted and in some cases not. It really depends where you are. It is of course possible to enjoy the Voltron fandom and not encounter any of this. However, if you're the kind of person who enjoys more of that discourse type of talk surrounding a fandom, it can be very difficult. So will there be more Voltron update vids? Of course. Voltron is a very fascinating show to discuss shipping-wise. However, it is even more fascinating to discuss when one gives it time to see where the story is going. It's very easy with Voltron to jump in and be like, this ship is over, or this ship is happening, or all of the clues are there. However, Voltron is attempting to build something, and in some ways its quick turnaround may be hurting with that. It's hard to say. At the end of the day, it's one of those series that will really benefit from its conclusion, basically seeing how all of the pieces come together, and if they do so satisfactorily, it will retroactively make a lot of what has occurred within the canon make a lot more sense. Of course, it's fun to think that one has it all figured out and they've seen all of the clues, and maybe they have. Who knows what will happen? Perhaps certain shippers are right, perhaps certain shippers are wrong. However, at the end of the day, if that takes away from the enjoyment of fandom, that's when things become a problem. Indeed, for some, the shipping discourse has become so intense and so heightened that they stay away from discussing Voltron online or Voltron in general. And it's causing a bit of a backlash for people who don't watch the show for that and feel that those fans are watching the show for the wrong reason, which is of course unfair. People can watch shows for a variety of reasons, and the enjoyment they get out of it isn't superior or inferior to another type of enjoyment. So Why make this video? Well, while I was researching for the Voltron videos that I am indeed working on, Allura and Allura need their day. They will happen. It just was fascinating to me how difficult it can be to talk about this and how quickly it can turn into a very, let's say, passionate place. Passion is wonderful. It's absolutely wonderful. It's one of the great things of fandom and one of the fun things about being in a fandom while it's at its height. However, at the same time, sometimes if that passion overtakes the ability to have a real conversation, especially discussing a show's flaws or perhaps things that aren't being handled in the best of ways, then it can be clear that the fandom has gotten a titch out of control. Just a little bit. And of course, this happens and it's fine. Except for the death threats and bullying and harassment. That's never fun. It's one of those things where you just need to take a moment of self-reflection to see if you're doing that. If you want to, of course. Maybe you don't care. Some people feel that it's just about being swept up in the moment and enjoying all of what the show and fandom have to offer, and that is just part of it. It's simply one of those things that made me very ponderous. Made me think. Made me wonder. So I have to ask, one, do you wonder about stuff like that ever? Also, do you ever feel like you're not watching the same show as other Voltron fans? How invested are you in shipping in Voltron? Do you feel let down by the show in any way? Do you feel that the cast and crew have really mishandled how they discuss shipping and that is what has led to some of the confusion and some of the negativity within the fandom? Or do you think that everybody needs to chill out, calm down, sit down, watch the show, and see where it goes? Of course, all opinions valid, welcome, all ships valid, welcome. Let me know your favorite one down below. And I look forward to doing more update videos because of course now we have to update because with a rapid turnaround, you gotta update all of the Voltron ships and new ships that we haven't discussed yet. Let me know if you enjoy these more rambly chit chat videos on top of everything else, all of the other things we're doing. Speaking of, follow me on social media so you know when we're streaming, that being just the regular Tuesday live stream or our Dream Daddy stream and other game streams. We're doing all of the things. It's all happening. Thank you so much for spending some time pondering with me today. We have much more content coming out soon, and until then, let's get to that outro. Bye-bye. This has been Shipper's Guide to the Galaxy. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Special thanks to all of my patrons, names on the side, and as always, stay tuned, for there are as many ships out there as there are stars in the sky.